Aren't you just tired of it? This feeling that every single political debate has to get shoved into one of two boxes, left or right. It feels like we're using this old, worn-out map that just doesn't describe the world we actually live in. But what if there's a better way to look at things? A different lens that might just explain why all our conversations are so stuck, and maybe, just maybe, how we can get them moving again.
Believe it or not, the key might come from right here. A quote from over 100 years ago by a Chinese intellectual named Hu Xi. More problems, fewer isms. It sounds so simple, right? But inside that little phrase is this incredibly powerful, almost prophetic insight into the conflicts we're having right now. So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth can a debate from 1919 give us the sharpest tool for understanding arguments in the 21st century? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. And I promise you, the answer might completely change the way you listen to political arguments forever. To really get this quote, we have to go back to where it all started. We're talking about a famous, very public debate in China between two absolutely brilliant thinkers, Hu Xi and Li Dezhou. And this wasn't just some academic disagreement. This was a clash of ideas that would literally shape the future of an entire nation. Okay, so at the very heart of their argument were two totally different ways of seeing the world. And a great way to think about it is this: the repairman versus the architect. Hu Xi was the repairman. He was all about focusing on specific, concrete problems. You see a leak, you patch it. You find a bug, you fix it. But Li Dezhou, he was the architect. He believed the whole house was rotten to the core. You couldn't just patch it. You had to demolish the whole thing and rebuild it from a perfect, grand blueprint, a single, all-powerful ism. So let's dive a little deeper into what this problems versus isms debate was truly about. Because this wasn't just some squabble over policy. No, this was a fundamental fight over the very idea of how progress even happens. And this breakdown just lays it all out crystal clear. You see Hu Xi on one side with this bottom-up experimental approach. His whole mantra was boldly hypothesize, carefully verify. Basically, try stuff, see what works, and be humble about it. But then you look at the other side. They wanted a top-down, fundamental solution, a thorough awakening. You see, these aren't just different policies. They are two completely different operating systems for how you try to make the world a better place. But here's where it gets really cool. This whole historical debate, it actually points to a much deeper, much more universal principle that goes way beyond the politics of 1919 China. So what is the core logic that really separates these two ways of thinking?
And that brings us to the big idea. The most meaningful divide in our public debates might not be left versus right at all. It's evolution versus top-down design. Once you see the world through this lens, everything starts to click into place.
So, to get this, we first have to agree on something really important. Human society is what's called a complex system. That means it's not a simple machine, like a watch, where you can just swap out a gear. No, it's way more like a rainforest. Everything is interconnected, it's unpredictable, and it's always changing. You can't just engineer a rainforest from a single blueprint, right?
And that leads to two completely different ways of dealing with that complexity. The evolutionary mindset, the problem solvers, they see society as a garden that needs to be tended. You have to admit you don't know everything. So you prune a little here, you water a little there, you adapt, you patch, you evolve. But the top-down designer, they see society as a machine to be engineered. They have the perfect theory, the perfect blueprint, and they demand that messy, complicated reality bend to fit their clean, elegant idea.
And science actually tells us exactly why these huge top-down designs, these isms, are so incredibly dangerous when you try to apply them to a whole society. First, no single person or group can possibly know enough to design it all. Second, you change one little thing over here, and all of a sudden you cause total chaos over there, unintended consequences. And finally, you have this perfect static blueprint, but you're trying to impose it on a dynamic world that's changing every single second. It just doesn't work.
And this leads to some truly terrifying logic. Because if you believe that your design, your eschatism, is perfect, that it's the ultimate answer, then any amount of real-world pain and suffering can be justified to achieve it. Real people with real lives just become obstacles standing in the way of the perfect theory.
Okay, so now we have this powerful new lens, evolution versus design. Let's use it. Let's try it out as a kind of new political compass. I think you'll be pretty surprised how fast it starts to make sense of our modern social dynamics.
Let's start with age. For a lot of younger people who haven't spent decades investing in the current system, the idea of a total system reboot, well, it can seem exciting, maybe even necessary. This can make the pull of a grand top-down design that promises a brand new, better world feel incredibly strong.
But then, on the flip side, you have older folks. They've spent their whole lives patching, building, and investing in the world as it is. They've got careers, mortgages, families. They have a lot more to lose from a total reboot, so they often prefer a more careful, evolutionary, problem-solving approach.
What about professions? This is really interesting. People who are trained in fields with hard physical constraints and really fast feedback, think engineers, surgeons, farmers. They tend to have a deep respect for complexity. They know firsthand that things break in weird, unexpected ways, so they naturally lean towards careful, evolutionary fixes.
But on the other hand, people who work mostly with abstract ideas, academics, theorists, pundits, they can become really attracted to the intellectual beauty of a perfect top-down design. It looks so clean and logical on paper, without all the messy reality of actually having to make it work.
And when you start to combine these things, like age and profession, you get this fascinating social pattern that sometimes emerges. It's been called the barbell effect. It's this weird situation where intellectual elites and the uninformed can kind of end up on the same side, both favoring grand designs, while the pragmatic, hands-on middle prefers evolution. So what's the logic behind this strange alliance? Well, elites can sometimes suffer from a kind of rational arrogance, this belief that a perfect society can be designed from on high. Meanwhile, the uninformed, who might feel overwhelmed by how complicated everything is, often crave a simple, magical, one-size-fits-all solution that an ism promises. And that leaves the practical middle, the small business owners, the technicians, the nurses, stuck dealing with reality every day, just trying to fix what's actually broken. So with this new toolkit in hand, we can finally start to move beyond those blurry, unhelpful labels of left and right, and maybe start seeing the world and each other with a whole lot more clarity.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway, the one thing to remember from all of this. Maybe the most important political divide isn't about what you think, it's not about your policies or your party, it's about how you think.
So here it is. Here is your new tool for critical thinking. It's super simple. The next time you're listening to any kind of argument, just ignore the political labels for a second and ask yourself one question. Is this person proposing an adaptable, evolutionary fix to a specific problem, or are they defending a rigid, perfect theory, an ism, that demands the world bend to its will?
Seriously, think about it. The next time you're in a conversation or watching the news or scrolling online and you feel that familiar frustration, that feeling of people just talking completely past each other, just hit the pause button in your own head for a second and ask this one powerful question. In this moment, am I trying to solve a problem, or am I just defending an ism? The answer just might surprise you.